She woke up in a bed meant for a queen and had no idea how she got there. Lyra Frostveal, the Albino Omega, who'd survived her entire life alone in the frozen north, opened her eyes to silk sheets, roaring fires, and guards stationed outside her door. The last thing she remembered was collapsing in a blizzard. Certain death had finally caught up with her. Now the most powerful Alpha King in the realm was calling her his mate, publicly, officially, without ever asking her permission. This is the story of a rogue who refused to be claimed, a king who wouldn't let her go, and a bond neither of them chose but couldn't escape. If you're watching from New York, Los Angeles, London, or anywhere in between, stick with me until the end. Drop a like, tell me what city you're in, and let's see if a woman who trusts no one can survive the most dangerous thing she's ever faced: love wrapped in a crown. The wind screamed across the frozen tundra like a living thing, clawing at Lyra's face with icy talons. Each breath burned her lungs. Each step forward felt like wading through concrete. Her white hair, so pale it looked like frost itself, whipped around her face in tangled sheets. Snow caked her eyelashes. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago, or maybe it was 3 hours. Time had stopped meaning anything. She'd lost the trail. That was the thought that kept circling her mind, dull and relentless. She'd lost the narrow hunting path that wound through the northern peaks, and now she was wandering blind through a blizzard that would kill her as indifferently as it killed anything else stupid enough to be caught in it. Good, part of her thought. Let it end here. Lyra had been running for so long she barely remembered what it felt like to stop. 6 years. 6 years since she'd left the last pack that had tolerated her presence, and even tolerated was a generous word. They'd let her sleep in the grain shed. They'd thrown her scraps when they remembered. And when the pack alpha's son had decided an albino omega might be entertaining for a night, they'd looked the other way. She'd broken his nose and left before dawn. That was Lyra's life. Packs that didn't want her. Alphas who saw her as a curiosity or a commodity, and a world that had no place for a wolf who didn't fit. Too pale. Too strange. Too other. The white hair, the pale violet eyes, the skin that looked like it had never seen the sun. Those things marked her as different from the moment she was born. And different meant dangerous. Dangerous meant disposable. So she'd learned to survive alone. She was good at it too, better than most. She knew how to track elk across frozen ground, how to start a fire with damp wood, how to read the sky for storms. She knew which caves stayed dry, which rivers froze shallow enough to cross, and which mountain passes would kill you if you tried them after the first snow. But survival had rules, and she'd broken the biggest one: never travel during a blizzard. She hadn't had a choice. The shelter she'd been using, a half-collapsed trapper's cabin near the border of the Northern Dominion, had finally given up. The roof had caved in during the night, and she'd woken to snow piling onto her chest. She'd grabbed her pack and run, hoping to reach the next landmark before the storm got worse. The storm had other ideas. Now she was lost, freezing, and rapidly running out of strength. Her wolf, normally a steady, stubborn presence in the back of her mind, had gone quiet. That was bad. That meant her body was shutting down, prioritizing the barest functions to keep her alive a few minutes longer. Lyra stumbled, caught herself, stumbled again. Her knees hit the snow. The cold bit through her ragged leggings like teeth. Get up, she told herself. Get up or die here. She got up. 1 step. 2. 3. The world tilted. She couldn't tell if she was walking forward or in circles. The wind howled so loud she couldn't hear her own heartbeat. Somewhere in the storm she thought she saw light. A flicker. Maybe a campfire. Maybe just her brain dying and throwing hallucinations at her as a parting gift. She reached for it anyway. Her foot caught on something buried in the snow. She pitched forward, and this time she didn't get back up. Her body hit the ground hard, and the cold wrapped around her like a fist. This is it, she thought distantly. This is how it ends. Not in a fight, not defending herself, just cold, alone, forgotten. Her eyes closed. The wind kept screaming, and then warmth. It came from nowhere, sudden and impossible. A wall of heat that cut through the blizzard like a blade. Lyra's eyes fluttered open, confused, disoriented. She tried to move and couldn't. Her limbs wouldn't respond. But she could see, barely, a shape standing over her. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in furs that looked like they cost more than anything she'd ever owned. A voice rumbled above her, deep and commanding. "Stay with me." She wanted to laugh. Stay with him? She didn't even know who him was, but her body had other priorities. The warmth intensified, and she realized, slowly, distantly, that she was being lifted. Strong arms slid under her, cradling her against a chest that radiated heat like a furnace. The last thing she registered before unconsciousness took her was a scent, pine and smoke, and something wild, something that made her wolf stir for the first time in hours. And then nothing. Hearts. Pakat. When Lyra woke, the first thing she noticed was softness. Not the hard-packed snow she'd collapsed into. Not the rough stone floors of the cave she usually slept in. Softness. Silk against her skin. Thick blankets piled so high she could barely move under their weight. A mattress that felt like lying on a cloud. Her eyes snapped open. The ceiling above her was vaulted, painted with intricate designs. Wolves running through forests, moons hanging over mountains, stars scattered like diamonds. Tapestries hung on the walls, rich blues and silvers and golds. A fireplace the size of a doorway roared in the corner, filling the room with heat. Candles burned on every surface, their light soft and golden. This wasn't a shelter. This wasn't even a house. This was a palace. Lyra sat up too fast. Her head spun, and she grabbed the edge of the bed to steady herself. Her heart hammered in her chest. Where was she? How had she gotten here? The last thing she remembered was the blizzard, the cold. The door opened. Lyra's head whipped toward the sound. A woman stepped inside, dressed in a crisp gray uniform, carrying a tray. She was older, maybe 50, with silver streaks in her dark hair and the calm, efficient demeanor of someone who'd been doing this job for decades. "You're awake," the woman said, her tone warm but professional. "Thank the moon." "We were starting to worry." Lyra stared at her. "Where am I?" "The Northern Palace," the woman said, setting the tray on a table near the bed. "You've been asleep for 3 days." 3 days. Lyra's mind reeled. 3 days. She'd been unconscious for 3 days? And she was in the Northern Palace, the seat of power for the entire Northern Dominion, home to the most feared Alpha King in the realm. "How did I get here?" Lyra asked, her voice hoarse. The woman poured water from a silver pitcher into a crystal glass. "His Majesty found you in the storm. He brought you back himself." Lyra took the glass automatically, her hands shaking. "His Majesty?" "King Roran Ashfang," the woman said, as if that explained everything. It didn't. King Roran Ashfang was a legend, a warrior who'd united the fractured northern packs through sheer force and strategy, an alpha so powerful that other alphas bent the knee without a fight. Lyra had heard the stories. Everyone had. He was ruthless in battle, brilliant in politics, and utterly untouchable. And he'd saved her? "Why?" Lyra whispered. The woman's expression shifted, just slightly, but enough that Lyra noticed. "That's not for me to say. His Majesty will explain when he arrives." "When he arrives?" Lyra repeated, alarm spiking through her. "He's coming here?" "Of course," the woman said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He's been checking on you every few hours." Lyra's stomach dropped. Before she could respond, the door opened again. This time, the woman who entered wasn't a servant. She was younger, maybe Lyra's age, dressed in a formal gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant knot, and her sharp eyes swept over Lyra with open curiosity. "So you're finally awake," the woman said. Her tone was neutral, but there was an edge to it, something guarded, something assessing. "Good. The entire palace has been holding its breath, waiting for you to open your eyes." Lyra frowned. "Who are you?" "Lady Marin Silverclaw," the woman said, "daughter of the High Commander. And you are?" "Nobody," Lyra said flatly. Marin's eyebrows rose. "Nobody? You're in the Queen's chambers wearing clothes that cost more than most wolves earn in a year, and the king himself carried you through the palace gates. You're not nobody." Lyra looked down at herself. She was wearing a nightgown, soft, white, intricately embroidered, the kind of thing she would never touch, let alone wear. Someone had dressed her, someone had cleaned her, someone had put her in this bed, in this room, and treated her like she mattered, The thought made her chest tighten. I don't understand, Lyra said quietly. Why would he do this? I'm a rogue. I'm nothing to him. Marin's expression flickered, something between pity and envy. You really don't know, do you? Know what? Marin opened her mouth to answer, but the door opened again before she could speak. This time, the presence that entered the room was impossible to ignore. Roran Ashfang was taller than Lyra had imagined, broader. His shoulders filled the doorway, and the furs draped over them made him look like something carved from the mountains themselves. His hair was black as midnight, tied back from a face that was all hard angles and controlled power. Scars crossed his jaw and hands, marks of battles fought and won. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Gold. Bright, burning gold, like molten metal. And they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. The room went silent. Even Marin stepped back, bowing her head slightly. Roran crossed the space in 3 long strides and stopped at the foot of the bed. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He just looked at her, studied her really, like he was memorizing every detail. You're awake, he said finally. His voice was deep, rough-edged, the kind of voice that could command armies or quiet a room with a single word. Lyra forced herself to meet his gaze. You saved me. I did. Why? The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Because you're mine. Lyra froze, the words hung in the air like thunder. I'm what? She whispered. Roran's eyes didn't waver. My mate. The bond formed the moment I found you in the snow. I felt it. You will too, once your wolf recovers. Lyra's heart slammed against her ribs. No, that's not... It is, Roran said, his tone leaving no room for argument. And I've already made it official. Every pack in the Northern Dominion knows. You're my chosen mate. My future queen. The room spun. Lyra couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. She was a rogue. A nobody. And he was a king. Kings didn't bond with rogues. They didn't declare rogue Omegas their mates without asking. The realization hit her like ice water. You didn't ask me, Lyra said, her voice trembling with fury. You declared me your mate while I was unconscious. You made that decision for me. Roran's expression didn't change. I made the decision that would keep you alive. If I hadn't claimed you, every rival alpha in the realm would have tried to take you the moment they learned of the bond. You wouldn't have survived a week. That wasn't your choice to make, Lyra shouted, her hands fisting in the silk sheets. I've survived just fine on my own for years. I don't need your protection. I don't need your crown. And I sure as hell don't need you deciding my life for me. For the first time, something shifted in Roran's expression. A flicker of surprise, maybe even respect. You think I did this to control you? He asked quietly. Didn't you? Roran stepped closer, not threatening, just present, undeniable. I did this because the moment I saw you in that storm, broken, freezing, about to die, I knew I would burn the entire world to the ground before I let you go. That's what the bond is, Lyra. It's not a choice. It's not politics, it's a fact. You're mine. I'm yours. And I will protect you whether you want me to or not. Lyra's breath came fast and shallow. Her wolf stirred, recognizing the truth in his words, even as her mind rebelled against them. I don't want this, she whispered. Roran's jaw tightened. Then we have a problem. He turned and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Lyra demanded. Roran paused in the doorway, his hand on the frame. He didn't look back. To make sure the kingdom you don't want is ready to meet the queen who doesn't want them. And then he was gone. Lyra sat in the silence, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She was trapped in a palace, bonded to a king, declared a queen, and she hadn't agreed to any of it. Outside, the storm still raged. The silence in the chamber pressed down on Lyra like a physical weight. She stared at the door Roran had just walked through, her hands still gripping the silk sheets hard enough to make her knuckles ache. Her pulse hammered in her ears. The fire crackled. Outside the tall windows, snow continued to fall in thick, lazy spirals against a slate-gray sky. A queen. He'd called her a queen. Lyra wanted to laugh, but the sound stuck in her throat. She'd spent 6 years learning how to disappear, how to take up as little space as possible, how to slip through the cracks of a world that had no use for someone like her. And now the most powerful alpha in the North was telling her she belonged at the center of it all, that she was his, publicly and irrevocably, whether she agreed or not. The older servant who'd brought the water, she'd introduced herself as Calla, cleared her throat gently. "My lady, you should eat something. You've been without food for days." Lyra turned to look at her, and the title made her flinch. "Don't call me that." Calla's expression remained calm, unruffled. "It's what you are now. I didn't ask to be." "Few of us get to choose what we become," Calla said quietly. There was something in her tone, not pity exactly, but understanding. "But we do get to choose what we do with it." Lyra wanted to argue, but exhaustion was starting to creep back in. Her body still felt weak, hollowed out. 3 days of sleep wasn't enough to undo the damage the blizzard had done. She picked up the glass of water and drank slowly, buying herself time to think. Marin, the young noblewoman who'd been watching the exchange with sharp, calculating eyes, moved closer to the bed. "If you're planning to run, you won't make it past the gates. The palace guard answers to the king, and he's ordered them to keep you safe." "You mean keep me prisoner?" Lyra said. "Is there a difference?" Marin asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "You're bonded to him now. Even if you ran, the bond would pull you back. That's how it works for true mates." Lyra's wolf stirred at the words, a low hum of recognition that made her stomach twist. She'd heard stories about mate bonds, rare, powerful, supposedly unbreakable, but she'd never believed them. Fate was a luxury for wolves who had packs, families, safety. Rogues didn't get fate. They got survival. "I don't feel anything," Lyra said, though even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were a lie. She did feel something, a thread, faint but insistent, tugging somewhere deep in her chest. It had been there since she woke, a warmth she couldn't explain, a sense of knowing that shouldn't exist. And when Roran had walked into the room, that thread had pulled taut, humming with an intensity that had stolen her breath. She hated it. Marin smiled faintly. "You will. Once your wolf fully recovers, the bond will settle. And then—" She trailed off, shrugging. "Then you'll understand why he won't let you go." "I don't need to understand," Lyra said, setting the glass down harder than necessary. "I need to leave." "And go where?" Marin asked. "Back to the wilderness? Back to freezing in storms and hunting scraps? You nearly died out there, Lyra. His Majesty saved your life." "He made a choice for me without asking," Lyra shot back. "That's not saving. That's claiming." For a moment, Marin's composed mask slipped, and something raw flickered across her face. Jealousy, maybe, or frustration. "You have no idea how lucky you are," she said softly. "Do you know how many wolves in this kingdom would give anything to be where you are right now? To be chosen by him?" "Then they can have it," Lyra said. Marin's eyes hardened. "It doesn't work that way." Before Lyra could respond, the door opened again. This time it was a man, younger than Roran, maybe in his late 20s, with sandy hair and a broad, easy smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He wore the formal uniform of the palace guard, silver and black, with a sword strapped to his hip. "Ladies," he said, nodding to Marin and Calla before his gaze settled on Lyra. "So you're the one who's turned the entire palace upside down?" Lyra bristled. "I didn't ask to." "No one's saying you did." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I'm Captain Aldrich Ironclaw, head of the King's personal guard. His Majesty sent me to make sure you're settled and to answer any questions you might have." "I have one," Lyra said immediately. "When can I leave?" Aldrich's smile widened, but there was no humor in it. "Straight to the point. I like that." He leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "The answer is, you can't. Not yet, anyway. The King's made his claim public, which means every wolf with ambition or grudge is going to be watching this palace. If you step outside unprotected, you'll be dead or kidnapped within an hour." "I've survived worse," Lyra said. "Not as a queen, you haven't." Aldrich's tone turned serious. "You're not a rogue anymore, whether you like it or not. You're a target. And not just from outsiders. Half the nobles in this court think you're an upstart who doesn't belong here. The other half think you're a threat. Either way, you've got enemies you don't even know about yet." Lyra's stomach churned. She'd known, abstractly, that Roran's world would be dangerous. Kings didn't stay kings by being kind, but hearing it laid out so bluntly made it real in a way she hadn't prepared for. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Aldrich shrugged. "Because the king wants you alive, and because, despite what you might think, he's not trying to trap you. He's trying to keep you from getting killed before you figure out what you want." "I already know what I want," Lyra said. "I want my life back." "Then you're going to have to fight for it," Aldrich said. "Because the moment His Majesty declared you his mate, your old life ended. Now you've got to decide what the new one looks like." He pushed off the wall and headed for the door. Before he left, he glanced back at her. "For what it's worth, I've served Roran Ashfang for 10 years. He's a hard man, a brutal one when he has to be. But he doesn't lie, and he doesn't break his word. If he says he'll protect you, he will, even if it costs him everything." Then he was gone. Lyra sat alone with Calla and Merrin, the weight of too many words pressing down on her. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to wake up and discover this was all some fever dream brought on by frostbite and desperation. But the bond in her chest hummed steady and sure, and she knew, deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, that this was real. Calla moved quietly around the room, stoking the fire, arranging fresh linens. Merrin remained by the window, her arms crossed, staring out at the snow-covered gardens below. "You think I'm foolish," Lyra said finally. Merrin didn't turn. "I think you're scared. There's a difference." "I'm not scared," Lyra said, but the words rang hollow even to her own ears. "Yes, you are." Merrin turned to face her, and for the first time, her expression softened. "You're terrified. I can see it. You've spent your whole life alone, trusting no one, and now you're being told to trust the most powerful man in the realm, to let him protect you, to accept a bond you never asked for." She paused. "But being scared doesn't make you weak, Lyra. It makes you smart." Lyra looked away. "What would you do if you were me?" Merrin was quiet for a long moment. "I'd stop running," she said finally, "because running from a mate bond is like running from your own shadow. It'll follow you no matter how far you go, and eventually you'll have to turn around and face it." "But what if I don't want it?" Lyra whispered. "Then you tell him that," Merrin said. "You tell him to his face. You don't hide in this room. You don't run away in the middle of the night. You stand in front of him and you make him hear you, because that's the only way this ends, with both of you choosing what happens next, not just him." The words settled over Lyra like a challenge. Merrin was right. She'd been reacting, not acting. She'd been so focused on what had been taken from her that she hadn't stopped to think about what she could demand in return. If Roran wanted her as his mate, his queen, then he was going to have to earn it, and she was going to make damn sure he understood that. But the days that followed blurred together in a haze of confusion and frustration. Lyra was confined to the queen's chambers, though confined was a generous word. The rooms were vast: bedchamber, sitting room, private bath, a balcony that overlooked the snow-draped gardens. Servants came and went, bringing food she didn't ask for, clothes she didn't want, and careful, respectful distance that made her skin crawl. She wasn't a prisoner, they kept telling her. She was being protected. It felt like the same thing. Roran didn't come back. Not the first day or the second or the third. Lyra told herself she was relieved. She didn't want to see him, didn't want to hear him justify what he'd done. But every time the door opened, her pulse jumped, and every time it was someone else, disappointment flared hot and unwelcome in her chest. The bond was getting stronger. She could feel it now, a constant pull towards something she couldn't see. At night, it was worst. She'd lie in the too-soft bed staring at the ceiling and feel him. Somewhere, close, but not close enough. His presence was a steady anchor, warm and solid, and it made her furious that her wolf responded to it with longing instead of rage. On the fourth morning, Calla arrived with breakfast and news. "His Majesty has requested your presence at dinner tonight." Lyra's hand stilled on the book she'd been pretending to read. "Requested?" "Requested," Calla confirmed. "Not commanded. You're free to decline, of course." "Of course." Except declining would be cowardice, and Lyra had never been a coward. Fine, she said. I'll go. Calla nodded, unsurprised. I'll have something appropriate prepared for you to wear. I can dress myself, Lyra said. I'm sure you can, Calla said gently. But tonight, you're not just dressing yourself, you're dressing the future queen. There's a difference. Lyra wanted to argue, but Calla was already moving toward the wardrobe, and the older woman's calm certainty made resistance feel pointless. That evening, Lyra found herself standing in front of a mirror, barely recognizing her reflection. The gown Calla had chosen was deep blue, almost black, with silver embroidery that caught the light like frost. It was simple compared to what Marin wore, but it fit perfectly, and it made Lyra's pale skin and violet eyes look almost otherworldly. She looked like someone who belonged in a palace. She hated it. Aldrich arrived to escort her, offering his arm with a slight bow. You look beautiful, my lady. Don't, Lyra said. Don't what? Don't flatter me. I'm not in the mood. Aldrich grinned. Noted. But for what it's worth, I meant it. He led her through corridors she didn't recognize, past tapestries and sculptures and windows that looked out over a kingdom buried in snow. Servants bowed as they passed. Guards straightened. Everyone stared. Lyra kept her chin up and her expression neutral, the same mask she'd worn 100 times when walking through hostile pack territory. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. The dining hall was smaller than she'd expected, intimate even. A single long table dominated the room, set with silver and crystal. Candles burned everywhere, their light warm and golden. And at the head of the table, waiting, was Roran. He stood when she entered. He'd changed since she last saw him. No furs now, just a simple black shirt and trousers that somehow made him look even more imposing. His golden eyes tracked her every movement as Aldrich led her to the seat at Roran's right hand. Thank you for coming, Roran said once Aldrich had withdrawn. You didn't leave me much choice, Lyra replied. I gave you a choice, Roran said. You could have refused. And what? Spend another night locked in that room, wondering when you'd get tired of waiting and just drag me out here yourself? Roran's jaw tightened. I don't drag people anywhere against their will. You declared me your mate without asking, Lyra said. Seems like dragging to me. For a moment, silence stretched between them, taut and fragile. Then Roran exhaled slowly and sat back in his chair. You're right. Lyra blinked. What? You're right, Roran repeated. I made a choice for you without your consent, and I'd do it again, because the alternative was letting you die. But that doesn't make it fair, and it doesn't mean you owe me anything because of it. Lyra stared at him, thrown off balance. She'd expected defensiveness, maybe anger, not this. Then why am I here? She asked quietly. Because I want to know you, Roran said. Not the bond, not the queen I declared you to be. You, the woman who survived 6 years alone in the harshest territory in the north. The woman who looked me in the eye and told me to go to hell, even though I could snap her in half without trying. Despite herself, Lyra felt a flicker of something warm in her chest. You think flattery will work where force didn't? I think honesty might, Roran said. He gestured to the table. Eat, talk to me, talk. And if at the end of this meal you still want nothing to do with me, I'll have Aldrich escort you back to your chambers, and I won't bother you again. But give me this. One conversation. That's all I'm asking. Lyra hesitated. Every instinct she had screamed at her to refuse, to walk out, to keep her walls up and her distance intact. But something in Roran's expression, something raw and almost vulnerable, made her pause. One conversation, she said finally. Roran nodded. One conversation. Servants appeared with food. Roasted venison, winter vegetables, bread still warm from the oven. It smelled incredible, and Lyra's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten properly in days. She picked up her fork and took a bite, and the taste was so good it almost made her forget to be angry. Almost. Tell me about your life before this, Roran said. Before I found you. Lyra swallowed. Why? Because I want to understand what you lost when I claimed you, Roran said. I want to know what I took. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard again. She set her fork down and looked at him, really looked at him. His face was all hard lines and controlled power, but his eyes were steady, patient, waiting. There's not much to tell, Lyra said finally. I was born to a small pack in the western mountains. My parents died when I was young, sickness, not violence. The pack kept me because they had to, but they didn't want me. I was too different, too strange. When I was old enough, I left. How old? Roran asked. 14? Something flickered in Roran's expression. Anger, maybe, or grief. They let a 14-year-old Omega walk into the wilderness alone? They didn't let me, Lyra said. I chose to go. Staying would have been worse. Worse how? Lyra's hands tightened on her napkin. She didn't talk about this. Ever. But the words came anyway, pulled out by the quiet intensity of Roran's attention. The Alpha's son decided I was old enough to be useful, she said flatly. I broke his nose and left before anyone could stop me. Been on my own ever since. Roran went very still. When he spoke, his voice was low and dangerous. What was his name? It doesn't matter, Lyra said. He's probably dead by now. Wolves like him don't last long in the mountains. It matters to me, Roran said. Why? Lyra challenged. You going to hunt him down? Avenge my honor? I don't need you to fight my battles, Roran. I've been doing that myself for 6 years. I know you have, Roran said, and that's exactly why you shouldn't have to anymore. Lyra looked away, her throat tight. I don't know how to let someone else do it. Then let me teach you, Roran said quietly. The bond between them flared, warm and insistent, and Lyra felt her carefully constructed walls start to crack. She took a shaky breath and forced herself to meet his eyes. You said you wanted honesty, she said. So here it is. I don't trust you, I don't trust this bond, I don't trust any of this. Every instinct I have is telling me to run, because staying means giving up control, and control is the only thing that's kept me alive. I know, Roran said. Then why do you want me? Lyra asked, her voice breaking. I'm not gentle, I'm not obedient, I'm not anything a queen is supposed to be. I'm just a rogue who got caught in a storm. Roran leaned forward, his gaze intense. You want to know why I want you? Because when I found you in that blizzard, you were still fighting. You were half frozen, barely conscious, and you were still trying to survive. Because you looked me in the eye, a king, an alpha who could kill you without thinking, and you told me I didn't own you, because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and you don't even realize it. Lyra's breath caught. I don't want a queen who'll smile and nod and do what she's told, Roran continued. I want a partner, someone who'll challenge me, someone who'll stand beside me, not behind me. And the bond didn't make me want that. You did. For a long moment, Lyra couldn't speak. The words settled over her like snow, soft and relentless, and she didn't know how to respond. I don't know if I can be what you want, she said finally. Then don't be, Roran said. Be yourself. That's all I'm asking. The conversation shifted after that, became easier. Roran asked about her life in the wilderness, how she hunted, where she slept, what she did when the winters got bad. Lyra found herself answering, found herself almost enjoying it. He listened like every word mattered, like she mattered, and it was so foreign and so dangerous that she didn't know whether to lean into it or run. By the time the meal ended, the candles had burned low, and the sky outside had gone dark. Roran walked her back to her chambers himself, Aldrich trailing at a respectful distance. At the door, Roran stopped. Thank you for tonight. For what? Lyra asked. For giving me a chance, Roran said. I know it wasn't easy. Lyra looked up at him, at the way the candlelight caught the gold in his eyes, and felt the bond hum between them like a living thing. This doesn't mean I'm staying, she said. I know, Roran said, but I hope you will. He turned to leave, but Lyra's voice stopped him. Roran? He looked back. If I decide to leave, she said quietly, will you really let me go? Roran's expression was unreadable. If that's what you truly want, yes, but I'll spend every day hoping you come back. Then he was gone, and Lyra was alone with the bond singing in her chest, and a choice she still didn't know how to make. On the fourth day, Marin returned. She arrived in the afternoon carrying a wooden box inlaid with silver. The king sent this, she said, setting it on the table. Lyra eyed it warily. I don't want anything from him. Open it anyway, Marin said. Lyra hesitated, then flipped the latch. Inside was a cloak, thick, lined with white fur, dyed a deep midnight blue. It was beautiful, practical, the kind of thing that could keep someone alive in a northern winter. Beneath it was a note, written in sharp, precise handwriting. You'll need this if you plan to leave the palace. The gates open at dawn. The choice is yours. Lyra's breath caught. He's letting me go? She whispered. Marin's expression was unreadable. He's giving you a choice, a real one, this time. Lyra looked up sharply. What's the catch? No catch, Marin said. But if you walk out those gates, the bond won't break. You'll feel it no matter how far you run. And when you're out there, alone, unprotected, you'll have to decide if freedom is worth dying for. Lyra stared at the cloak, her hands trembling. This was what she wanted, wasn't it? A way out. A chance to reclaim the life Roran had taken from her. So why did the thought of leaving make her chest ache? Why would he do this? Lyra asked quietly. Marin tilted her head, considering. Because he's not a monster, no matter what the stories say. And because forcing you to stay would only make you hate him. She paused. He's betting you'll come back. He's wrong, Lyra said. Marin smiled sadly. We'll see. That night, Lyra lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The cloak sat on the chair by the door, a silent invitation, or a test. She couldn't decide which. The bond pulled at her, steady and relentless. She could feel Roran somewhere in the palace, awake, like her, waiting. At dawn, she made her choice. Lyra left as the sun rose, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. She wore the cloak Roran had sent, though it grated on her to accept anything from him. The palace gate stood open, flanked by guards who watched her pass without a word. No one stopped her. No one tried to talk her out of it. She walked into the snow-covered forest beyond the palace walls, and for the first time in days, she felt like she could breathe. The wilderness welcomed her back like an old friend. The cold was sharp and clean. The silence was absolute. She knew how to move through this world, how to find water, how to track game, how to read the land. This was hers. This was where she belonged. By midday, she'd put 5 miles between herself and the palace. By evening, she'd found a cave she recognized, one she'd used before. She built a fire, ate the dried meat she'd packed, and told herself she'd made the right choice. But the bond didn't agree. It pulled at her, relentless and insistent, a tether she couldn't cut. She felt Roran's presence like a compass needle pointing north, and the farther she walked, the more it hurt. Not physically. Worse. It was an ache that settled in her bones, a loneliness that had nothing to do with being alone. She lasted 3 days. On the 3rd night, she woke to the sound of wolves howling, close, too close. She grabbed her knife and crept to the mouth of the cave. In the moonlight, she saw them. A pack, at least a dozen strong, moving through the trees with purpose. They weren't hunting animals. They were hunting her. Lyra's heart slammed into her throat. She'd been careless, too focused on putting distance between herself and the palace to cover her tracks properly. Now she was cornered, outnumbered, and miles from help. The lead wolf, a massive alpha with scars crisscrossing his muzzle, stepped into view. He shifted, bones cracking, fur receding, until a man stood in the snow. He was older, maybe 50, with cold eyes and a smile that made Lyra's skin crawl. "There you are," he said, his voice smooth and mocking. "The rogue queen. We've been looking for you." Lyra tightened her grip on the knife. "I'm not a queen. Tell that to King Roran," the man said. "He seems to think otherwise, and that makes you valuable." "I'm worth nothing to you," Lyra said. "Oh, I disagree." The man took a step closer. "A mate bond is a powerful thing. Roran Ashfang would do just about anything to get you back. Trade agreements, territory, maybe even his crown, if we pushed hard enough." Lyra's blood ran cold. "He won't negotiate with you." "Then we'll see how much you're worth dead," the man said. He gestured, and the pack moved in. Lyra dodged the first wolf, slashing with her knife. The blade caught fur and flesh, drawing blood, but there were too many. A second wolf hit her from the side, knocking her off balance. She rolled, came up fighting, but claws raked across her ribs and pain exploded through her side. She was going to die here. The scarred alpha shifted, coming at her himself. Lyra braced, knowing she couldn't win but refusing to go down without a fight. And then the forest exploded. Roran Ashfang came through the trees like a storm given form. He didn't shift, didn't need to. He moved with lethal precision, his claws extending mid-stride as he tore into the first wolf that reached for Lyra. Blood sprayed, bones snapped. The pack scattered, but Roran didn't stop. He was a blur of violence and fury, every movement calculated to kill. The scarred alpha tried to run. Roran caught him by the throat and slammed him into a tree hard enough to crack the trunk. "You touched her," Roran growled, his voice barely human. The man choked, clawing at Roran's hand. "She's just mine," Roran snarled and crushed his windpipe. The body dropped. The remaining wolves fled into the darkness, and silence fell over the clearing. Roran stood there, breathing hard, blood dripping from his hands. Then he turned to Lyra. She was still on the ground, one hand pressed to her bleeding ribs, her body shaking. She wanted to tell him she didn't need his help, that she could have handled it. But the words wouldn't come. Roran crossed the distance in 2 strides and dropped to his knees in front of her. His hands, still slick with blood, cupped her face, his golden eyes scanning her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" he demanded. "I'm fine," Lyra whispered, though she wasn't sure it was true. "You're bleeding," Roran said, his voice rough. He moved her hand away from her ribs, and his expression went dark when he saw the claw marks. "We need to get you back to the palace." "No," Lyra said, trying to push him away. You can what?" Roran snapped, his control finally fracturing. "Survive out here alone while every pack in the north hunts you for leverage? You think I gave you freedom so you could get yourself killed?" "You don't get to decide that," Lyra shouted, tears stinging her eyes. "You don't get to control my life because of some bond I never asked for." "I'm not trying to control you," Roran said, his voice dropping to something raw and desperate. "I'm trying to keep you alive. Don't you understand? The moment I found you, everything changed. You're not just some rogue I can walk away from. You're everything. And if you die out here, it will destroy me." Lyra froze. The bond between them flared, white-hot and undeniable. And for the first time she felt it fully. His fear, his desperation, his absolute unshakable certainty that she belonged to him the same way he belonged to her. "I didn't choose this," she whispered. "Neither did I," Roran said. "But it's ours now, and we have to decide what to do with it." He stood, lifting her into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She didn't fight him. She was too tired, too shaken, too overwhelmed by the realization that running hadn't solved anything. It had only proven what she'd been trying to deny. She couldn't escape the bond. She couldn't escape him. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't want to. As Roran carried her back through the forest toward the palace, Lyra closed her eyes and let herself lean into his warmth. The bond hummed between them, no longer fighting, just there. Constant, undeniable, real. When they reached the palace gates, the guards straightened, eyes widening at the sight of their bloodied king carrying his wounded mate. Roran didn't slow. He carried Lyra straight to her chambers, laid her gently on the bed, and barked orders for healers. Lyra watched him through heavy-lidded eyes, watched the way he moved, controlled chaos, barely contained fury tempered by something that looked almost like fear. "You came for me," she said quietly. Roran looked at her and his expression softened. "Always." The healers worked through the night, their hands moving with practiced efficiency over the claw marks that tore across Lyra's ribs. She barely felt the sting of their salves and stitches. The bond was louder now, drowning out everything else, a constant thrum of warmth and presence that wrapped around her like a second skin. Roran stood in the corner of the room, arms crossed, watching every move the healers made with the intensity of a predator guarding wounded prey. "The wounds are shallow," the older healer said, a woman with silver hair and gentle hands. "They'll heal clean if she rests." "She'll rest," Roran said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Lyra wanted to protest, to tell him she didn't need orders, but exhaustion pulled at her bones. The adrenaline that had carried her through the attack was gone, leaving only the hollow ache of a body pushed past its limits. When the healers finally left, Roran didn't move. He stood there in the candlelight, still covered in blood, most of it not his own, and watched her with an expression she couldn't read. "You should clean up," Lyra said quietly. "I will," Roran said, "when I'm sure you're not going to disappear the moment I turn my back." "Huh?" "I can't exactly run anywhere right now," Lyra said, gesturing to her bandaged ribs. That didn't stop you before. The words hung between them, sharp and true. Lyra looked away, her jaw tight. I wasn't trying to get myself killed. Then what were you trying to do? Roran asked, stepping closer. Prove a point? Show me you don't need me? Because congratulations, you almost succeeded. Another 5 minutes and I would have found your body instead of you. Lyra's hands fisted in the sheets. I needed to know if I could still survive on my own. If I'm still me without this bond telling me what to feel. And, Roran asked, what did you learn? Lyra met his eyes, and the truth tasted bitter. That I was wrong. Roran's expression softened. He moved to the chair beside the bed and sat, his movements heavy with exhaustion. The bond doesn't change who you are, Lyra. It just shows you who you could be with someone beside you. I don't know how to do that, Lyra whispered. I don't know how to let someone in. Then we'll learn together, Roran said. Because I don't know how to do this either. I've spent 10 years building a kingdom, and I did it alone because that's what alphas do. We lead. We protect. We don't ask for help. He paused. But the moment I saw you in that storm, something in me changed, and I realized that being strong doesn't mean being alone. It means finding someone strong enough to stand beside you. Lyra's throat tightened. What if I'm not strong enough? You are, Roran said with absolute certainty. You just don't see it yet. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was rough with calluses, warm and solid. The bond flared at the contact, sending heat racing up her arm, and Lyra didn't pull back. Rest, Roran said quietly. We'll talk more in the morning. He stood to leave, but Lyra's grip tightened on his hand. Stay. Roran looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. Lyra? Please, she said. Just stay. I don't want to be alone tonight. For a long moment, Roran didn't move. Then he nodded and settled back into the chair, his hand still holding hers. I'm not going anywhere. Lyra closed her eyes, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt safe. The palace woke to rumors the next morning. The rogue queen had fled. The king had chased her down. There had been blood, violence, wolves dead in the forest. By the time Lyra opened her eyes, the entire court was buzzing with speculation. Marin arrived mid-morning with fresh clothes and a grim expression. You've caused quite a stir. Lyra sat up carefully, wincing at the pull in her ribs. I didn't mean to. Intentions don't matter in a place like this, Marin said, setting the clothes on the bed. What matters is perception. And right now, the court sees you as a liability, a rogue who can't be controlled, who puts the king in danger every time she runs. I didn't ask him to come after me, Lyra said. No, Marin agreed, but he did. And that tells everyone in this palace exactly how much power you have over him, which makes you either the most dangerous woman in the kingdom or the most vulnerable. Possibly both. Lyra's stomach twisted. I don't want power over him. Too bad, Marin said bluntly. You have it anyway, and the nobles are already trying to figure out how to use it, or how to eliminate it. What do you mean? Marin hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. There's going to be a formal presentation tonight. His Majesty is introducing you to the court as his chosen mate. Every noble family in the Northern Dominion will be there, and they'll all be watching to see if you're worthy of the crown. Lyra's chest tightened. I never agreed to this. You came back, Marin said gently. That was agreement enough. I came back because I almost died, Lyra said. And he saved you, Marin countered. Again, do you see the pattern? You can keep fighting this, keep running, keep pretending you don't belong here. But sooner or later, you're going to have to decide. Are you his mate or aren't you? Because half measures won't work in this world. You're either all in or you need to walk away for good. The words hit like a punch. Lyra looked down at her hands, at the calluses and scars that told the story of 6 years surviving alone. What if I'm all in and they still reject me? Then you make them accept you, Marin said. You're not some helpless Omega who needs their approval. You're the woman who survived the northern wilderness alone. You're the woman the king chose. Act like it. Lyra met her eyes. You sound like you're on my side. Marin's expression was unreadable. I'm on the side of whoever's strong enough to survive this court. Right now, that might be you. Don't prove me wrong. Masek. The presentation hall was massive, its vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of ancient battles and legendary kings. Chandeliers hung like frozen stars, casting light over hundreds of wolves dressed in their finest, silks and furs, jewelry that glittered like ice. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. Lyra stood in a side chamber, dressed in a gown that felt like armor, deep crimson, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light with every breath. Her white hair had been swept up and pinned with crystals that looked like snowflakes. She barely recognized herself in the mirror. Roran appeared in the doorway, and for a moment neither of them spoke. He wore formal robes, black and silver, with his crown, a simple circlet of dark metal resting on his brow. He looked every inch a king. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "I look like someone else," Lyra said. "No," Roran said, stepping closer. "You look like yourself, just more." He offered his arm. "Are you ready?" "No," Lyra said honestly. "Good," Roran said. "Neither was I the first time I did this. But you don't have to be ready. You just have to be brave. And I know you are." Lyra took his arm, and the bond surged between them, steadying her. "What do I have to do?" "Stand beside me," Roran said. "Let them see you, and don't apologize for who you are." The doors opened, and they stepped into the hall. The reaction was immediate. Conversations died. Heads turned, every eye in the room fixed on Lyra, assessing, judging, weighing her worth. She felt the weight of their stares like physical pressure, but she kept her chin up and her expression neutral. She'd survived worse than disapproving looks. Roran led her to the raised platform at the end of the hall, where two thrones sat side by side. He helped her up the steps, and when they reached the top, he turned to face the court. "You know why I've called you here," Roran said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the hall. 3 weeks ago, I found my mate. I claimed her, and tonight, I present her to you as your future queen, Lyra Frostvile, my chosen, my equal, my bonded mate." The silence that followed was deafening. Then a voice rang out from the crowd, male, sharp with disdain. "She's a rogue." Murmurs rippled through the hall, agreement and condemnation blending together. Lyra's jaw tightened, but Roran's expression didn't change. "She was a rogue," Roran said. "Now she's mine, and anyone who has a problem with that is welcome to leave." No one moved, but the tension in the room ratcheted higher. Another voice, this time female. "How do we know the bond is real? Rogues are known for deception." "The bond is real," Roran said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "I felt it the moment I found her, and anyone with eyes can see it." "Then let us see it," a third voice called, older, authoritative. Lyra recognized the speaker, Lord Theron Blackpaw, one of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom, a man who'd served Roran's father and barely tolerated Roran himself. "If the bond is true, it will show itself. Let her shift. Let us see if she bears your mark." Lyra's blood ran cold. Among mated wolves, the bond sometimes manifested physically. A mark, a scent, a visible sign. But it didn't always appear immediately. Sometimes it took weeks, months, and sometimes it never showed at all. She didn't have a mark. She knew she didn't. And if she shifted now, in front of all these wolves, they'd see it. They'd know the bond was new, untested, weak. They'd tear her apart. "No," Roran said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "She doesn't have to prove anything to you." "Then how do we know she's not using you?" Theron pressed. "How do we know this isn't some rogue scheme to gain power?" "Because I said so," Roran growled. "Your word is not enough," Theron said. "Not when the future of the kingdom is at stake." The crowd murmured agreement, and Lyra felt the tide turning against her. These wolves didn't want her. They'd never wanted her. And now they had the perfect excuse to reject her. She could stay silent. Let Roran fight this battle for her. Or she could do what Marin had said. Prove she was strong enough to survive this court. Lyra stepped forward, pulling free of Roran's grip. "You want proof?" Roran's eyes widened. "Lyra, don't." "I'll shift," Lyra said, her voice ringing clear across the hall. "I'll show you whatever you want to see. But know this, I'm not doing it to prove I'm worthy of him. I'm doing it to prove he's worthy of me. Shock rippled through the crowd. Even Theron looked taken aback. Lyra stepped down from the platform and walked to the center of the hall. The crowd parted around her, forming a circle. She could feel Roran's tension through the bond, feel him ready to intervene to stop this. But she sent him a look, trust me, and he went still. Lyra closed her eyes and called her wolf. The shift was never easy. Bones broke and reformed, muscles tore and rebuilt, skin rippled and sprouted fur. But Lyra had done it 1,000 times, and she knew how to make it fast. In seconds, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2, her white fur gleaming under the chandelier light. The crowd gasped. Lyra's wolf was beautiful, larger than most Omegas, with ice-blue eyes and a presence that commanded attention. But more importantly, along her shoulder, barely visible against the white fur, was a mark. Not Roran's. Something older, darker. A crescent moon, black as midnight, bisected by a vertical line. Lyra heard the whispers start immediately, saw the shock and fear spread through the crowd like wildfire. She shifted back, bones cracking, and stood naked and defiant in the center of the hall until someone threw her a cloak. Theron stared at her, his face pale. That mark is the mark of the forgotten, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. I didn't know what it was until tonight. Didn't know what it meant, but I see the recognition in your faces. So why don't you tell me? Silence. Then Roran's voice, rough with shock. The forgotten are a myth. Apparently not, Lyra said, turning to face him. Someone want to explain to me what I am? It was Theron who spoke, his voice shaking. The forgotten were the first wolves, the original pack blessed with power beyond anything we know today. They vanished centuries ago, hunted to extinction because the other packs feared them. Their mark was always the crescent moon, the symbol of their bloodline. That's impossible, Marin breathed from somewhere in the crowd. They're all dead. Clearly not all of them, Lyra said. She looked at Roran. Did you know? No, Roran said, and she believed him. I had no idea. Well, now you do, Lyra said, and now they do. She turned back to the court. So here's your proof. I'm not just some rogue scheming for power. I'm apparently the last descendant of a bloodline you all thought was extinct, and I'm bonded to your king, whether you like it or not. The hall erupted. Shouts, arguments, fear, and fury blending together. Lyra stood in the center of it all, her heart pounding, and realized she'd just changed everything. Roran was beside her in an instant, his hand on her arm. We need to go, now. Why? Lyra asked. Because half this room just decided you're too dangerous to live, Roran said grimly, and the other half wants to use you. He pulled her toward the side exit, Aldrich and a contingent of guards forming a protective wall around them. But before they could reach the door, Theron's voice rang out. You cannot protect her from what she is, Your Majesty. The Forgotten brought chaos and destruction. Their power was too great, too unstable. If she carries their blood, then she's under my protection, Roran said, turning back with murder in his eyes. And anyone who tries to harm her will answer to me. You would risk civil war for a rogue? Theron demanded. I would burn this kingdom to ash before I let anyone touch her, Roran said. The words echoed through the hall, and Lyra felt the bond blaze between them, fierce, unbreakable, terrifying in its intensity. Theron's face hardened. Then you leave us no choice. He raised his hand, and half the nobles in the room shifted, wolves of every size and color, all turning toward Lyra and Roran with teeth bared and eyes gleaming. You would challenge your king? Roran asked, his voice deadly calm. We would save him from himself, Theron said. The Forgotten cannot be allowed to return. Not even one. Roran shifted, his massive black wolf towering over the crowd. Aldrich and the guard shifted too, forming a defensive line. But they were outnumbered 3-1, and Lyra knew they couldn't win this fight. She looked at Roran, at the guards ready to die for her, and made a decision. Stop, she said. Roran's wolf turned to her, golden eyes blazing. I'll leave, Lyra said. Right now. I'll walk out of here and you'll never see me again. No war, no bloodshed. Just let them live. No, Roran growled, his voice rumbling even in wolf form. Yes, Lyra said. She looked at Theron. That's what you want, isn't it? Me gone. We want you dead, Theron said bluntly, but exile will suffice. Lyra, don't do this, Roran said, shifting back to human form. I won't let you. It's not your choice, Lyra said quietly. It's mine, and I'm choosing to save your kingdom. She turned and walked toward the door. Every step felt like tearing herself in half, the bond screaming in protest, but she kept moving. Roran caught her arm. If you walk out that door, I'm coming with you. Lyra looked at him. This king, this alpha, this man who'd saved her life twice and was ready to throw away everything for her, and felt her heart break. No, she said. You're staying here. You're going to be the king they need, and I'm going to figure out what the hell I am. You're mine, Roran said, his voice breaking. I know, Lyra said, and you're mine, but right now that's not enough. She pulled free and walked out of the hall. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp. Behind her she heard Roran roar, rage and grief and fury, but she didn't look back. She shifted and ran, into the forest, into the dark, into the unknown. And behind her, the bond stretched and pulled and screamed, but it didn't break. Because some things, Lyra was learning, were stronger than choice. Some things were fate. She ran for hours, putting miles between herself and the palace. The forest was dark and treacherous, but her wolf knew these paths. She'd run them before, alone and afraid, and now she ran them again, except this time she wasn't running from death. She was running toward answers. The mark of the forgotten burned on her shoulder, a constant reminder of a heritage she'd never known she had. Her parents had never mentioned it. Had they even known? Or had they hidden it, hoping she'd never manifest the mark? Questions circled her mind like vultures, but she had no answers. All she knew was that she couldn't go back to the palace, not until she understood what she was, what it meant, what it would cost. Dawn broke cold and gray, and Lyra finally stopped running. She stood on the edge of a frozen lake, her breath misting in the air, and let the exhaustion crash over her. The bond pulled at her, relentless. She could feel Roran miles away, could feel his fury and fear and desperate need to find her, but she pushed it down, buried it deep, and focused on the one thing she knew for certain. She was alone again. But this time it was by choice, and somehow that made it hurt even more. A sound behind her made her spin, a footstep, deliberate and careful. Lyra shifted back to human form, ready to fight or flee, and froze. A woman stood at the edge of the trees, old, ancient even, with silver hair that fell to her waist and eyes that gleamed like moonlight. She wore robes that looked like they'd been woven from starlight, and her presence was so powerful it made Lyra's wolf whimper and retreat. So, the woman said, her voice like wind through winter branches, the last of the forgotten finally awakens. Lyra's heart stopped. Who are you? The woman smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. I am the one who's been waiting for you, child, and you are in far more danger than you realize. She gestured to the forest behind her, and Lyra saw them, dozens of wolves emerging from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Run if you like, the woman said, but you cannot escape what you are, and neither can he. The wolves closed in, and Lyra realized with sickening clarity that leaving the palace hadn't saved anyone. It had condemned them all. Lyra's wolf surged forward, instinct overriding thought. She didn't know who these wolves were or what they wanted, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wouldn't go down without a fight. The first wolf lunged, and Lyra shifted mid-dodge, her white fur bristling as she spun and slashed with her claws. The wolf yelped and retreated, blood dripping from its muzzle. Two more came at her from opposite sides, coordinated and fast. She couldn't fight them all. There were too many, and they moved with unnatural precision, like they were connected by some invisible thread. Enough, the old woman said, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The wolves stopped instantly, freezing mid-attack. They stood motionless, eyes still glowing with that eerie light, waiting. Lyra shifted back to human form, her chest heaving, her body coiled to run. What do you want from me? The woman stepped closer, moving with the slow confidence of someone who'd never feared anything in her life. I want you to understand what you are, what you could become. The wolves of the Northern Dominion fear the forgotten because they don't understand us. They see our power and call it chaos. They see our strength and call it destruction. But we were never the monsters they claimed we were. We? Lyra repeated, her voice sharp. You're one of them? One of the forgotten? I am the last of the true forgotten, the woman said. Until you. I am Seraphine, keeper of the old ways, guardian of the bloodline that should have died centuries ago. And you, child, are the proof that our kind cannot be erased. Lyra's mind reeled. My parents never told me. I didn't even know this mark existed until tonight. They wouldn't have known, Seraphine said. The mark only appears when the blood awakens, usually in times of great danger or great need. Your bond with the Alpha King triggered it. The power recognized him as worthy, and so it revealed itself. Power? Lyra asked warily. What power? Seraphine smiled, and it was the kind of smile that promised secrets and suffering in equal measure. The power that made the forgotten legendary. We could command other wolves, bend them to our will. We could heal wounds that should have been fatal. We could sense danger before it struck and move faster than any normal wolf. That's why the other packs hunted us. Not because we were cruel, but because we were unstoppable. Lyra's stomach twisted. I don't have any of that. Not yet, Seraphine said. But you will. The power is in your blood, waiting to be awakened, and I can teach you how to use it. Why would you do that? Lyra demanded. What do you get out of this? Seraphine's expression hardened. Survival. The packs that destroyed the forgotten are still out there, still watching for any sign that we might return. When they learn you exist, and they will, they'll come for you. And they won't stop until you're dead and your bloodline is ash. But if you're trained, if you know how to use what you are, you might stand a chance. Lyra looked at the wolves surrounding her, at their glowing eyes and silent obedience. These wolves, you're controlling them. I am, Seraphine confirmed. It's one of the gifts of our blood. But it's not slavery, child. I'm not forcing them. I'm simply guiding their instincts. They want to serve. I give them purpose. That's still control, Lyra said, her voice cold. And I want nothing to do with it. Seraphine tilted her head, studying her. You say that now. But what will you say when Roran Ashfang's enemies come for him because of you? What will you say when the nobles who fear you decide the only way to protect themselves is to kill everyone you care about? Will you still refuse the power that could save them? The bond flared in Lyra's chest, sharp and insistent. She could feel Roran even now, miles away, probably tearing the palace apart looking for her. The thought of him in danger because of what she was made her chest tighten with rage and fear. How do I know you're telling the truth? Lyra asked. How do I know this isn't some trap? You don't, Seraphine said simply, but you also don't have a choice. The moment that mark appeared, your fate was sealed. You can run from it, hide from it, deny it all you want, but the truth will find you, and when it does, you'll wish you'd listened to me. Lyra's jaw clenched. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust this woman, not to follow her into whatever twisted plan she had. But Seraphine was right about one thing. Lyra couldn't go back to the palace without understanding what she was. She couldn't risk bringing more danger to Roran or the people who'd tried to protect her. 1 week, Lyra said. You teach me what I need to know, and then I make my own choice about what to do with it. Seraphine's smile widened. 1 week. That's all I need. She turned and walked into the forest, the wolves parting to let her pass. Lyra hesitated for only a moment before following, the bond in her chest pulling tight and painful as she moved farther from Roran. She didn't look back. Oh. The place Seraphine led her to wasn't a cave or a shelter. It was a ruin. Ancient stone walls half buried in snow, covered in carvings that looked older than memory. The air here felt different, charged with something Lyra couldn't name. Power, maybe. Or history. This was ours, Seraphine said as they stepped through the crumbling archway. The last stronghold of the forgotten. The other packs destroyed it 300 years ago, but the foundation remains. The power remains. Inside, the ruins opened into a courtyard, sheltered from the wind. A fire burned in the center, tended by wolves in human form. Young, old, male, female, all with the same glowing eyes Lyra had seen earlier. These are my students, Seraphine said. Wolves who carry traces of forgotten blood, too diluted to manifest the mark, but strong enough to feel the call. They've chosen to serve the old ways. Lyra looked at them, at their quiet reverence, and felt deeply uneasy. You're building an army. I'm building a future, Seraphine corrected. One where the forgotten aren't hunted and killed for existing, where our power is respected, not feared. By controlling other wolves? Lyra challenged. By leading them, Seraphine said. There's a difference. Lyra wasn't sure she believed that, but she was here now, and she needed answers more than she needed moral certainty. Over the next 3 days, Seraphine taught her. Not gently, not patiently, but with the ruthless efficiency of someone who'd survived centuries by being smarter and stronger than everyone else. The first lesson was the hardest, learning to feel the power in her blood. Close your eyes, Seraphine instructed, standing across from Lyra in the courtyard. Reach inside yourself, past your wolf, past your instincts. There's a well of power there, deeper than anything you've touched before. Find it. Lyra tried. She closed her eyes and searched, but all she felt was the bond with Roran, humming constant and insistent, drowning out everything else. I can't, she said, frustration bleeding into her voice. The bond is too loud. Then use it, Seraphine said. The bond is power too. It connects you to him, yes, but it also amplifies everything you are. Stop fighting it and let it guide you. Lyra gritted her teeth and tried again. This time, instead of pushing the bond away, she followed it, down into the warmth and certainty, into the place where she and Roran were tangled together. And beneath that, she felt it. A pulse, a current, something vast and ancient and waiting. Her eyes snapped open, and the world looked different, sharper, brighter. She could see the individual snowflakes falling, could hear the heartbeat of every wolf in the courtyard, could feel their presence like heat against her skin. Good, Seraphine said, satisfaction in her voice. Now hold it. Lyra tried, but the power slipped through her fingers like water. The world snapped back to normal, and exhaustion hit her like a wave. It takes practice, Seraphine said, but you'll learn. You have no choice. The second lesson came the next day, learning to influence another wolf. Seraphine brought one of her students forward, a young male, maybe 20, with nervous eyes and a submissive posture. His name is Kael, Seraphine said. He's volunteered to help you practice. Your task is simple. Make him kneel. Lyra stared at her. I'm not doing that. Why not? Seraphine asked. He's willing, and you need to understand how the power works. I don't want to control people, Lyra said. This isn't control, Seraphine said. It's communication. You're not forcing him. You're speaking to his wolf, showing it what you need. If his wolf agrees, it will obey. If it doesn't, nothing happens. The choice is still his. Lyra looked at Kael. He nodded slightly, encouraging. Fine, Lyra said. But if I hurt him, this stops. She reached for the power again, found it faster this time, and held it. Then she looked at Kael and pushed, not with words, but with intent. Kneel. Kael's eyes widened. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his wolf responded, a flicker of acknowledgement, and his legs buckled. He dropped to one knee, breathing hard. Good, Seraphine said. Now release him. Lyra pulled back, and Kael stood, shaking slightly but unharmed. How did that feel? Seraphine asked him. Like a suggestion, Kael said slowly. Not a command. I could have resisted if I wanted to, but I didn't want to. Seraphine turned to Lyra. You see? It's not slavery. It's influence, leadership, the strong guiding the willing. Lyra wasn't convinced, but she didn't argue. She was too busy processing the implications of what she'd just done. The third lesson came on the fourth day, and it was the one that changed everything. You've learned to touch the power, Seraphine said. You've learned to influence others. Now you need to learn to protect. She gestured, and two of her larger students stepped forward, both alphas, both built like mountains. They're going to attack you, Seraphine said, and you're going to stop them without shifting, without fighting. Use the power. Make them stop. This is insane, Lyra said. This is survival, Seraphine countered. Now do it. The alphas didn't hesitate. They came at her fast and brutal, and Lyra's instincts screamed at her to shift, to run, to fight. But she forced herself to stay human, to reach for the power instead. It flooded through her, overwhelming and chaotic. She pushed it outward, not a suggestion this time, but a command. Stop! The alphas froze mid-stride, their bodies locked in place. Their eyes were wide with shock, their wolves howling in confusion and submission. Lyra stared at them, her heart pounding. She'd done that. She'd stopped two full-grown alphas with nothing but will and power. Release them, Seraphine said quietly. Lyra let go, and the alphas stumbled backward, breathing hard. That, Seraphine said, is what you're capable of. And that's why they fear us. Lyra looked down at her hands, shaking with adrenaline and something darker. She'd felt it when she commanded them, the rush of absolute control, the certainty that they would obey. It had been intoxicating, and that terrified her. I don't want this, she whispered. Too bad, Seraphine said. It's yours, and you need to decide what you're going to do with it. That night, Lyra sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. The bond with Roran was a constant ache, pulling at her, demanding she return. She could feel his desperation, his fear, his fury at not being able to find her. It took everything she had not to shift and run back to him. But she couldn't, not yet. Not until she knew how to control this power, how to keep it from consuming her. Footsteps approached, and Seraphine sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. You're afraid of what you are, Seraphine said finally. Aren't you? Lyra asked. No, Seraphine said. I've lived with this power for over 300 years. I've seen what it can do, the good and the terrible. And I've learned that power itself is neither. It's a tool. What matters is who wields it and why. I could hurt people with this, Lyra said quietly. You could, Seraphine agreed. Or you could protect them. The choice is yours. Lyra looked at her. Why are you really doing this? Why help me? Seraphine was quiet for a long time. Because I'm tired, she said finally. Tired of hiding. Tired of watching our bloodline fade into nothing. You're the first true forgotten born in 2 centuries, Lyra. You're proof that we're not gone. And if you can survive, if you can build something lasting with that alpha king of yours, maybe our kind has a future after all. What if I don't want that responsibility? Lyra asked. Then you walk away, Seraphine said, and you live with the knowledge that you could have changed everything and chose not to. The words settled over Lyra like stones. The next morning, everything changed. Lyra woke to chaos, wolves running, shouting, the clash of steel on steel. She bolted upright and rushed outside to find the courtyard under attack. Royal guards. Roran's guards. They'd found her. Aldrich was at the front, his sword drawn, facing down Seraphine's students. Stand down! By order of King Roran Ashfang, you will surrender Lyra Frostveil or face execution for treason. She's not your prisoner, Seraphine said coldly, stepping forward. She's here by choice. She's bonded to the king, Aldrich shot back, which makes her a citizen of the Northern Dominion, and you're harboring her illegally. She's forgotten, Seraphine said, which makes her mine. The courtyard erupted. Swords clashed, wolves shifted, and Lyra stood frozen in the center of it all, watching the people who'd protected her fight the people who'd come to save her. Stop! She shouted, but no one listened. The power rose in her chest, unbidden and overwhelming. She didn't think, didn't plan, she just acted. Stop! The command roared out of her, carried by power that shook the ground beneath their feet. Every wolf in the courtyard froze. Seraphine's students, Roran's guards, even Aldrich. They stood motionless, their eyes wide with shock and fear. Lyra stood in the center of them all, breathing hard, her eyes blazing with power she could barely contain. I said stop, she repeated, her voice steady now. All of you. Slowly, she released them. The guards stumbled, weapons clattering. Seraphine's students backed away, submission written in every line of their bodies. Aldrich stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. What are you? I'm forgotten, Lyra said quietly. And I'm done hiding it. She turned to Seraphine. Thank you for teaching me, but I'm leaving. To go back to him? Seraphine asked. To make my own choice, Lyra said. Like you told me. She looked at Aldrich. Take me to Roran. Aldrich nodded slowly, still wary. He's been difficult since you left. I imagine he has, Lyra said. Let's fix that. As they rode back toward the palace, Lyra felt the bond strengthen with every mile, felt Roran's presence grow sharper and more desperate. She'd made her choice. Now she just had to convince him, and the kingdom, that it was the right one. When the palace came into view, she saw him. Roran stood at the gates, flanked by guards, his expression thunderous. The moment he saw her, he shifted and ran. He met her halfway, shifting back to human form and pulling her off the horse into his arms. "Don't ever do that again," he growled into her hair. "Don't ever leave me like that again." "I had to," Lyra said, clinging to him just as tightly. "I had to understand what I am." "I don't care what you are," Roran said fiercely. "You're mine. That's all that matters." "It's not," Lyra said, pulling back to look at him. "But it will be. I promise." She took his hand and turned to face the palace, where the nobles and guards were gathering, staring at her with a mixture of fear and awe. "I'm forgotten," Lyra called out, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "And I'm not going anywhere, so you can accept me or you can fight me. But know this, I'm not the threat you think I am. I'm the woman who's going to stand beside your king and protect this kingdom, whether you're ready for that or not." Silence. Then, from the back of the crowd, someone knelt. One of the younger guards, his eyes fixed on Lyra with something like wonder. Another followed, then another. Within minutes, half the courtyard was on their knees, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. Roran looked at her, pride and love blazing in his eyes. "Well played, my queen." Lyra smiled, fierce and free. "I'm not your queen yet, but I'm getting there." The courtyard remained silent, half the wolves still kneeling, the other half watching with expressions that ranged from awe to barely concealed hostility. Lyra stood beside Roran, her hand in his, and felt the weight of every stare like a physical thing. She'd just declared herself forgotten in front of the entire court. There was no taking it back now. Lord Theron pushed through the crowd, his face twisted with fury. "This is madness. You would have us bow to a bloodline that nearly destroyed us all?" "The Forgotten never tried to destroy anyone," Lyra said, her voice steady. "They were hunted because the other packs feared what they didn't understand, and now you're doing the same thing to me." "You just controlled half this courtyard with a single word," Theron spat. "You call that understanding? That's domination." "I call it survival," Lyra shot back. "You were about to tear each other apart. I stopped a bloodbath. If that makes me dangerous, then maybe you should ask yourselves why you're so eager to spill blood in the first place." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some agreeing, others dissenting. The divide was clear. The younger wolves, the ones who'd knelt, looked at Lyra with something like hope. The older nobles looked at her like a threat that needed to be eliminated. Roran stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate silence. "Enough. Lyra is my mate. She is under my protection, and anyone who challenges that challenges me directly." His golden eyes swept across the courtyard. "I've ruled this kingdom for 10 years. I've bled for it, fought for it, sacrificed for it, and I will not let fear and ignorance tear it apart from the inside." "She could turn on us at any moment," Theron argued. "The Forgotten's power is too great, too unstable." "Then it's a good thing she's on our side," Roran said. "Because I've seen what she can do, and I'd rather have that power defending this kingdom than destroying it." Theron's jaw clenched. "You're blinded by the bond. You can't see—" "I see perfectly clearly," Roran interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "What I see is a woman who's survived alone in the harshest territory in the north, who's fought off rogues and killers without hesitation, who just prevented a civil war in my own courtyard. That's who I see, Theron. And if you can't see it too, then maybe you're the one who's blind." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Theron's face flushed red, but he didn't back down. "You would risk everything for her?" "I already have," Roran said, "and I'd do it again." Lyra squeezed his hand, warmth flooding through the bond. But before she could speak, a new voice rang out from the crowd. "I believe her." Everyone turned. Merrin stepped forward, her head held high despite the shock on the faces around her. "I believe Lyra Frostveil. I've watched her these past weeks. I've seen how she carries herself, how she thinks, how she refuses to bow to anyone, including the king." She looked at Lyra directly. "You could have used your power to force us all to accept you, but you didn't. You gave us a choice. That's not the action of a tyrant, that's the action of a leader. A few wolves nodded in agreement. Then more. The tide was shifting, slowly but surely. Another voice joined in, Captain Aldrich, stepping forward from the guards. I've fought beside His Majesty for a decade. I've seen him face down armies, negotiate with warlords, make impossible decisions, and I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at her. That bond is real, and if the king trusts her, then so do I. More voices rose in support. Younger nobles, guards, servants who'd watched Lyra navigate the palace with quiet dignity instead of arrogance. The momentum was building, and Theron could feel it slipping away from him. This isn't over, he said quietly, his voice cold with promise. Then he turned and strode from the courtyard, a handful of older nobles following in his wake. Roran watched them go, his jaw tight. He's going to be a problem. Let him, Lyra said. I'm not afraid of him. You should be, Roran said, turning to her. Theron doesn't make threats. He makes plans. And he has allies, old families with long memories and deep pockets. If he decides you're a genuine threat to the kingdom, he'll move against you, against us. Then we'll be ready, Lyra said firmly. Roran studied her face, and something in his expression softened. When did you get so brave? I've always been brave, Lyra said with a faint smile. I just didn't know it yet. He pulled her close, and the bond flared between them, warm and solid and absolutely certain. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Lyra felt like she might actually survive it. But survival, she was learning, wasn't the same as victory. The crowd began to disperse, wolves breaking into smaller groups, whispering and debating what they'd just witnessed. Lyra could feel their eyes on her, assessing, judging, trying to reconcile the stories they'd heard about the forgotten with the woman standing in front of them. Calla appeared at her elbow, her expression carefully neutral. My lady, perhaps we should get you inside. You've had quite an ordeal. I'm fine, Lyra said, though exhaustion was starting to creep through her bones. You're bleeding, Calla said quietly, nodding toward Lyra's arm. Lyra looked down and saw the scratches from the earlier fight with Seraphine's wolves, shallow but still seeping blood through the fabric of her gown. She'd been so focused on everything else she hadn't even noticed. Come, Roran said, guiding her toward the palace entrance. We need to get you cleaned up, and then we need to talk about what happens next. The queen's chambers felt different now, not like a cage, but like a sanctuary. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed while healers tended to her wounds. Nothing serious, just cuts and bruises that would fade in a day or two. Roran paced the room like a caged wolf, his energy crackling with barely contained fury. We need to move against Theron before he has time to consolidate his supporters, Roran said. If we wait, he'll build a coalition strong enough to challenge us openly. And if we move too quickly, we'll look like tyrants, Lyra countered, like we're punishing him for disagreeing with us. He tried to have you killed, Roran said flatly. I'm certain of it. Those assassins didn't just appear out of nowhere. You don't have proof, Lyra said. Not yet, Roran admitted, but I will. Aldrich is already investigating. The head healer finished wrapping Lyra's arm and stepped back with a small bow. You'll heal quickly, my lady. Your wolf is strong. Thank you, Lyra said. When the healers had left, Lyra stood and crossed to where Roran was standing by the window, staring out at the darkening sky. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, resting her cheek against his back. We'll figure this out, she said quietly. Together. Roran's hands covered hers. I should have protected you better. Should have seen this coming. You can't predict everything, Lyra said. And I don't need you to protect me from every threat. I need you to trust that I can handle myself. Roran turned in her arms to face her. I do trust you. But that doesn't mean I'm not terrified of losing you. You won't, Lyra said. I'm not that easy to kill, remember? He almost smiled. Almost. No, you're not. You're impossibly stubborn and reckless, and yours, Lyra finished. Don't forget that part. Roran pulled her close and kissed her, and the bond between them blazed so bright it pushed back the shadows creeping through the room. When they finally pulled apart, his expression was calmer, more focused. We do this smart, he said. We gather evidence, we build our case, and when we move against Theron, it won't be revenge. It'll be justice. Agreed, Lyra said. But in the meantime, we need to show the court that I'm not a threat, that the forgotten power can be controlled, used for good. How do you propose we do that? Roran asked. Lyra thought for a moment. The winter supplies. You said there are villages on the northern border that didn't get enough provisions before the snows came. Let me go there. Let me help them. Show them that the forgotten aren't monsters. Roran frowned. That's dangerous territory, remote. If Theron's allies are out there, then we'll deal with them, Lyra said. But we can't hide in this palace forever. If I'm going to be queen, I need to be seen. I need to prove myself. Roran studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, but you're taking a full guard contingent, and Aldrich goes with you. Deal, Lyra said. Parset. They left 3 days later, just as dawn broke over the mountains. Lyra rode beside Aldrich at the head of a column of 20 guards, supply wagons rolling behind them. The journey would take 4 days through some of the harshest terrain in the northern Dominion, but Lyra welcomed it. She'd spent 6 years navigating these mountains alone. Now she'd do it with purpose. The first village they reached was called Frost Hollow, a cluster of small houses built into the mountainside, home to maybe 50 wolves. The people came out slowly when they saw the royal banners, their expressions wary and cautious. An older woman stepped forward, her hair gray and her back bent with age. Your Majesty, she said, bowing to the royal crest on the supply wagons. Then her eyes found Lyra, and she froze. You're the one they're talking about. The forgotten. I am, Lyra said, dismounting. My name is Lyra Frostveal, and I'm here to help. The woman's eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. The stories say the forgotten could control minds, make wolves into slaves. The stories are wrong, Lyra said gently. I can influence other wolves, yes, but I can't force anyone to do anything they don't choose to do, and I would never try. She gestured to the supply wagons. We brought food, medicine, firewood, enough to get you through the rest of winter. The woman looked at the wagons, then back at Lyra. Why? Because you're part of this kingdom, Lyra said, and a queen protects her people, all of them. Slowly the woman's expression softened. We heard you were different. Didn't believe it until now. She extended a weathered hand. I'm Alara, Elder of Frost Hollow, and you're welcome here. Lyra shook her hand, relief flooding through her. Thank you. Over the next 2 days, Lyra and the guards distributed supplies to 3 more villages. At each one, the initial fear gave way to cautious acceptance, and then something warmer. Lyra didn't use her power, didn't try to prove anything beyond her willingness to work beside them, hauling firewood, tending to sick children, listening to their concerns. By the time they reached the 4th village, word had spread. The people came out to meet them not with fear, but with curiosity, some even with hope. A young mother approached Lyra, a baby wrapped in her arms. Is it true you can heal? She asked hesitantly. Lyra blinked. I've never tried. My daughter, the mother said, pulling back the blanket to reveal a tiny face marked with fever. She's been sick for weeks. The healers say there's nothing they can do. But if you have the old power, Lyra's chest tightened. She looked at Aldrich, who nodded encouragement. I can try, Lyra said quietly, but I don't know if it will work. She took the baby carefully, cradling the small weight in her arms. The child was burning with fever, her breathing shallow and labored. Lyra closed her eyes and reached for the power, not to control, but to feel, to understand what was wrong. The power responded, flowing through her like water, and suddenly she could sense it, an infection, deep in the child's lungs, fighting a battle the tiny body was losing. Lyra poured warmth into the baby, channeling the power not as a weapon, but as a gift. She felt the infection recoil, felt the child's wolf stir and strengthen, felt the fever begin to break. When she opened her eyes, the baby was breathing easier, her color already improving. The mother gasped, tears streaming down her face. You saved her. Your daughter saved herself, Lyra said, handing the baby back gently. I just gave her the strength to fight. A word of the healing spread faster than wildfire. By the time they left the village the next morning, people were lining the path to see them off, not with fear, but with gratitude, with hope. Aldrich rode beside Lyra, a slight smile on his face. You're winning them over. I'm just doing what needs to be done, Lyra said. That's what makes you a good queen, Aldrich said. The journey back to the palace took 3 days, and with each mile, Lyra felt the bond with Roran grow stronger, more insistent. She could feel his relief, his pride, his desperate need to see her safe. When the palace finally came into view, she saw him waiting at the gates. Roran met her halfway, pulling her off her horse and into his arms before she could even speak. "Don't ever do that to me again," he growled into her hair. "Do what?" Lyra asked, laughing. "Help people?" "Leave for a week without proper communication," Roran said. "I've been going insane." "I had Aldrich send daily reports," Lyra said. "It's not the same as having you here," Roran said. He pulled back to look at her, his hands cupping her face. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected," Lyra said. "The people, they listened. Some of them even accepted me." "Of course they did," Roran said. "You're extraordinary." Aldrich cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, there's something you need to know. While we were gone, Lord Theron made a move." Roran's expression darkened. "What kind of move?" "He's called for a formal challenge," Aldrich said, "under the old laws. He's claiming that your bond with Lyra is false, that she's using forgotten power to manipulate you, and that the only way to prove otherwise is through trial by combat." Lyra's blood ran cold. "Combat? Between who?" "Between you and a champion of his choosing," Aldrich said. "If you win, he drops all challenges and accepts your position. If you lose, I die," Lyra finished. "No," Roran said immediately. "Absolutely not. I won't allow it." "You don't have a choice," Aldrich said grimly. He invoked the old laws. They're binding, even for the king. If Lyra refuses the challenge, she's admitting guilt, and the court can legally demand her exile or execution. Lyra felt the world tilt. This was it. This was Theron's endgame. He couldn't kill her directly, so he was forcing her into a fight she might not win. "Who's his champion?" Lyra asked quietly. Aldrich's expression was grim. "Garrick Ironfang, former arena champion, undefeated in over 50 fights." Roran's hands tightened on Lyra's shoulders. "This is suicide. Garrick is twice your size and trained specifically to kill." "Then I'll have to be smarter," Lyra said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Lyra, I'm doing this," Lyra said, meeting his eyes. "Because if I don't, Theron wins. He gets to prove that the Forgotten are cowards, that I'm not worthy of you or this kingdom, and I won't give him that satisfaction." Roran looked like he wanted to argue, but he could see the determination in her face. "Then we train," he said. "We have 1 week before the challenge, and I'm going to make sure you're ready." The next 7 days were the hardest of Lyra's life. Roran pushed her relentlessly, sparring sessions that left her bruised and exhausted, strategy lessons that made her head spin, endurance training that tested every limit she had. But Lyra didn't complain. She couldn't afford to. On the 3rd day, Seraphine appeared in the training yard, materializing out of nowhere like she always did. "I heard about the challenge," she said without preamble. "Come to tell me I'm going to die?" Lyra asked, wiping sweat from her face. "No," Seraphine said. "I came to teach you how to win." Over the next 4 days, Seraphine taught Lyra things about the forgotten power she'd never imagined. How to use it not just to command, but to predict. To sense an opponent's next move before they made it. How to enhance her own speed and strength without exhausting herself. How to turn her opponent's aggression against them. "The key," Seraphine said, "is not to fight like he expects. Garrick is a brute. He relies on size and power. You need to be faster, smarter, more unpredictable. Make him chase you, tire him out, and when he makes a mistake, and he will, you strike." By the 7th day, Lyra felt as ready as she'd ever be, which was to say, terrified but determined. The challenge took place in the palace arena, a massive circular space surrounded by tiered seating. Every noble in the kingdom was there, along with representatives from the border packs. Thousands of wolves, all watching to see if the Forgotten would prove herself worthy or die trying. Lyra stood in the center of the arena, wearing simple fighting leathers, her white hair bound back. Across from her stood Garrick Ironfang, a mountain of muscle and scars, his eyes cold and calculating. Theron stood in the noble's box, his expression smug. "The rules are simple," he announced. First blood, submission, or death. May the strongest wolf win. The horn sounded. Garrick moved fast for someone his size, closing the distance in seconds. Lyra dodged his first strike, rolled under his second, and came up behind him. She slashed with her claws, drawing blood across his shoulder blade. First blood. But Garrick didn't stop. He spun and backhanded her hard enough to send her flying. She hit the arena wall and tasted blood. The crowd roared. Lyra pushed herself up, her ribs screaming in protest. Garrick was grinning now, confident. He thought he had her. He was wrong. Lyra reached for the power, not to control him, but to read him. To see the way his muscles tensed before he struck, the subtle shifts in his weight that telegraphed his next move. She became a ghost, dodging and weaving, never where he expected her to be. She led him in circles, making him chase, making him waste energy. And slowly she saw it, the fatigue creeping into his movements, the frustration building in his eyes. When he lunged again, Lyra was ready. She sidestepped, grabbed his extended arm, and used his own momentum to flip him onto his back. Before he could recover, she was on him, claws at his throat. "Yield," she said quietly. Garrick stared up at her, shock and fury warring in his expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. "I yield." The arena exploded with sound, cheers, shouts, disbelief. Lyra stood, breathing hard, and looked up at Theron. His face was white with rage. "The challenge is complete," Roran announced, standing in the royal box. "Lyra Frostveil has proven herself. All challenges to her position are hereby dismissed." Theron stood, his hands shaking. "This proves nothing. She used her power to—" "She used skill," Roran interrupted coldly. "And courage, and honor. 3 things you know nothing about, Theron. Now sit down and accept your defeat, or I'll have you removed." For a moment, it looked like Theron might actually attack. Then, slowly, he sat. Lyra walked out of the arena to thunderous applause, and Roran was there to catch her when her legs finally gave out. "You did it," he whispered, holding her close. "You actually did it." "I told you I would," Lyra said, managing a tired smile. The formal bonding ceremony took place 2 weeks later in the palace gardens where Lyra had nearly died. It was a deliberate choice, Roran's way of reclaiming the space, of turning a place of violence into one of hope. The garden had been transformed. Torches lined the paths, casting golden light over snow that sparkled like diamonds. White flowers, rare in winter, imported at great expense, hung from every branch. The entire court was in attendance, along with representatives from every pack in the Northern Dominion. Lyra stood at the center of it all, wearing a gown that looked like it had been woven from moonlight and ice. Her white hair was unbound, falling in waves down her back, and the mark of the forgotten was visible on her bare shoulder, no longer hidden, but displayed proudly. Roran stood across from her, dressed in black and silver, his crown catching the torchlight. But it was his eyes that held her, those burning gold eyes that had seen her at her worst and still chosen her. The ceremony itself was simple, ancient. A priestess of the old ways spoke the words that would bind them not just as mates, but as equals, as partners. "Do you, Roran Ashfang, Alpha King of the Northern Dominion, take Lyra Frostveil as your bonded mate to stand beside, to protect, to honor in all things?" "I do," Roran said, his voice steady and sure. "And do you, Lyra Frostveil, last of the forgotten, take Roran Ashfang as your bonded mate? To stand beside, to challenge, to honor in all things?" Lyra's throat was tight, but her voice didn't waver. "I do." "Then by the laws of our kind and the power of the bond that connects you, I declare you mated, in this life and all that follow." Roran stepped forward and took Lyra's hands. The bond between them flared so bright it was almost painful, and then it settled, no longer fighting, no longer uncertain, just there, complete. "I love you," Roran said quietly, so only she could hear. "I loved you from the moment I found you in that storm, and I'll love you until the world ends." "I love you too," Lyra said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Even though you're impossibly stubborn and you make terrible decisions." Roran laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Like claiming a rogue as my mate?" Exactly like that," Lyra said, smiling. He kissed her then, and the garden erupted in cheers. Wolves howled their approval, the sound echoing across the snow-covered mountains like a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Lyra looked out at the crowd, at Maren, smiling with genuine warmth, at Aldrich, grinning like a fool, at the hundreds of wolves who'd come to witness this moment, and she realized something she'd never thought possible. She belonged here, not because of the bond, not because of her power, but because she'd chosen it. She'd chosen to stay. She'd chosen to fight. She'd chosen to stand beside a king and build something worth protecting. Roran leaned down and whispered in her ear, "Ready to be queen?" Lyra looked up at him, fierce and unafraid. "I'm not ready, but I'm willing, and that's enough." "More than enough," Roran said. They walked through the garden together, hand in hand, as the court parted to let them pass. At the edge of the garden, where the palace met the wilderness, Lyra paused and looked out at the frozen forest that had been her home for so long. She could still go back. The wilderness would always be there, waiting. But she didn't want it anymore. She wanted this, the palace, the people, the king who'd saved her life and then given her the freedom to choose her own future. She turned back to Roran and smiled. "Let's go home." Spring came to the northern dominion slowly, reluctantly. The snow began to melt, revealing green beneath. The rivers thawed. The air grew warmer, gentler. And in the palace gardens, where winter had tried to claim Lyra's life twice, new flowers began to bloom. Lyra stood on the balcony of the queen's chambers, her chambers now, and watched the sun rise over the mountains. Behind her, she could hear Roran moving around the room, could feel him through the bond even without looking. "Come back to bed," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "In a minute," Lyra said. She felt his arms wrap around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "How different everything is," Lyra said quietly. 6 months ago, I was alone in a blizzard, certain I was going to die. Now I'm here, with you, with a kingdom that's starting to accept me. It feels like a dream." "It's not a dream," Roran said. "It's real. You're real. And you've earned every bit of this." "Have I?" Lyra asked. "Sometimes I still feel like that rogue wandering the wilderness, pretending to be something I'm not." "You're not pretending," Roran said firmly. "You're exactly who you were always meant to be. You just needed time to see it." Lyra turned in his arms to face him. "The Southern Territories are sending ambassadors next month. They want to discuss trade agreements." "I know," Roran said, "and you'll handle it brilliantly." "They'll ask about the Forgotten," Lyra said, "about what I can do." "Then you'll tell them the truth," Roran said. "That you're powerful, yes, but you use that power to protect, not destroy, just like you've been doing since the day you arrived." Lyra leaned into him, breathing in his scent, pine and smoke and home. "What if more of them come? Other Forgotten, like Seraphine said? What if I'm not the last?" "Then we'll welcome them," Roran said. "We'll give them what you never had, a place to belong. A home where they don't have to hide what they are." Lyra looked up at him, her heart swelling. "You really mean that?" "Every word," Roran said. "This kingdom is changing, Lyra, because of you, and I think that change is exactly what we need." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and the bond hummed between them with a contentment that felt like forever. A knock at the door interrupted them. Maren's voice called from the other side. "Your Majesties, the council is ready when you are." Lyra pulled back with a sigh. "Duty calls." "It always does," Roran said. "But tonight, we're ours. Just us." "Promise?" Lyra asked. "Promise," Roran said. They dressed and made their way to the council chamber, where the nobles were already gathering. As Lyra took her seat beside Roran's throne, her own throne now, equal in height and grandeur, she caught Theron's eye across the room. He'd been stripped of his titles, but allowed to remain in court as a minor advisor. It was a mercy some thought Roran shouldn't have granted, but Lyra had argued for it. Better to keep their enemies close, where they could watch them. Theron inclined his head slightly, not quite respect, but acknowledgement. Progress, Lyra supposed. The meeting covered trade routes, border disputes, requests from outlying villages. Standard kingdom business. But Lyra noticed something different now. When she spoke, people listened, not out of fear, but because her ideas had proven sound. because she'd earned their respect. When the meeting ended, Aldrich approached with a sealed letter. "This just arrived, Your Majesty, from the Eastern Territories." Lyra broke the seal and read quickly, her eyebrows rising. "They want to send their children here, for training." Moran looked over her shoulder. "Training in what?" "They don't say specifically," Lyra said, "but I think they want their young wolves to learn from me, to understand the forgotten power, in case more of our kind emerge." "That's significant," Roran said. "They're treating you as a teacher, not a threat. Or they're smart enough to realize that understanding is better than fear," Lyra said. She looked up at him. "What do you think?" "I think it's your decision," Roran said. "But I think it could be the beginning of something important, a new generation raised without the old prejudices." Lyra thought about it, about the young wolves who'd knelt in the courtyard that first day, who'd seen her not as a monster, but as a possibility. "I'll do it. We'll start small, maybe 10 students. See how it goes." Roran smiled. "That's my queen." Over the following months, the students arrived. Young wolves from across the territories, all carrying traces of dormant power they didn't understand. Lyra taught them what Seraphine had taught her, not just how to use the power, but when not to use it, how to balance strength with restraint, how to lead without dominating. It was hard work, exhausting and sometimes frustrating, but it was also deeply rewarding. She was building something that would outlast her, a legacy of understanding instead of fear. One evening, after a particularly long training session, Lyra returned to her chambers to find Roran waiting with wine and a knowing smile. "Rough day?" he asked. "One of the students accidentally commanded his entire family to sing at dinner," Lyra said, collapsing onto the sofa. "For 3 hours. They couldn't stop." Roran laughed. "That's unfortunate." "It's mortifying," Lyra said, "but also kind of hilarious. He was so embarrassed he couldn't look at me for the rest of the session." Roran handed her a glass of wine. "You're doing important work, you know, changing the future of our kind." "I'm just teaching them not to accidentally mind control their families," Lyra said. "You're teaching them to be better than what came before," Roran corrected. "That's everything." Lyra sipped her wine, letting the warmth spread through her. "Do you ever regret it, claiming me that day in the storm?" Roran set down his glass and pulled her close. "Not for a single second. You're the best decision I ever made." "Even though I've complicated your entire kingdom?" Lyra asked. "Especially because of that," Roran said. "This kingdom needed complicating. It was stagnant, stuck in old ways that didn't serve us anymore. You shook everything up, forced us to change, to grow, and we're stronger for it." Lyra rested her head on his shoulder. "I love you." "I love you too," Roran said. "Now and always." They sat in comfortable silence, the bond between them humming with contentment. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of gold and purple. Years passed. The Northern Dominion thrived under Roran and Lyra's rule. The kingdom grew stronger, richer, more unified. Trade flourished with the Southern Territories. The old prejudices didn't disappear entirely. They never would. But they faded, replaced by something better. Hope. And in the palace gardens, where Lyra had once nearly died, a new tradition began. Every spring, on the anniversary of her bonding ceremony, the people of the Northern Dominion gathered to plant flowers, white ones, in honor of the rogue who became a queen. Lyra stood among them now, older but still fierce, Roran at her side. Their students, now teachers themselves, helped distribute seedlings to the crowd. Children who'd grown up never knowing the fear their parents had felt toward the forgotten ran laughing through the paths. "Do you ever miss it?" Roran asked quietly, watching the children play. "The wilderness? The freedom?" Lyra thought about it. Thought about the cold, the hunger, the endless fear of being discovered and destroyed. And then she thought about this, the warmth of Roran's hand in hers, the laughter of children who didn't fear her, the knowledge that she'd built something worth protecting. "No," she said. "I don't miss it at all." "Good," Roran said. "Because I'm not letting you go." "I know," Lyra said, smiling up at him, "and I'm not going anywhere." A young girl approached, maybe 7 years old, holding a white flower. "Queen Lyra?" Is it true you used to live alone in the mountains? Lyra knelt to the girl's level. It is. Weren't you scared? The girl asked. Every day, Lyra said honestly. But being scared didn't make me weak. It made me careful. It made me strong. Like you are now? The girl asked. Lyra smiled. Just like now. The girl handed her the flower. This is for you, because you're brave. Lyra took the flower, her throat tight with emotion. Thank you. The girl ran off to join her friends, and Lyra stood, holding the small white flower like a treasure. Roran wrapped his arm around her waist. Still think you're not ready to be queen? I'm still not ready, Lyra said, but I'm here anyway, and that's what matters. They stood together in the garden as the sun set, surrounded by their people, their kingdom, their future. And Lyra realized that the wilderness had taught her how to survive. But this palace, these people, this man beside her, had taught her how to live. The rogue who'd wandered the frozen frontier alone had found her home. Not in a place, but in a person, and in a purpose that was bigger than both of them. As darkness fell and the lanterns were lit, the garden glowed with warm golden light. Wolves young and old gathered around the newly planted flowers, sharing stories and laughter. Lyra felt the bond with Roran pulse with deep contentment, felt the connection to her students. A different kind of bond, born of trust and teaching rather than fate. She was no longer the Omega who didn't fit anywhere. She was a queen, a teacher, a symbol of change, and most importantly, she was exactly who she chose to be. The bond between her and Roran blazed bright and eternal, a promise that neither frost nor fire nor fate could ever break. And in the garden where winter had tried twice to claim her life, white flowers bloomed eternal, a testament to survival, a promise of tomorrow, a legacy of love that would outlast them all.